Okay, let's bring in our panel. Joining us now for more from Beijing, Wang Peng is a researcher at the Chongyang Institute for Financial Studies at Renmin University. With me in the studio, Shuja Nawaz is a distinguished fellow in the South Asia Center at the Atlantic Council. From Chicago, Russell Zanca is a professor of anthropology focusing on Central Asia at Northeastern Illinois University. And Sadanand Dhume is a resident fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. Thanks to all of you for joining us. Wang Peng, let me start with you in Beijing. The summit is over. President Xi Jinping called it historic. What, in your view, were the main accomplishments of the summit?
Yes, this is a historic event in the development of SCO. This year is the 17th year of this organization. And if we come back to the predecessor of SCO, what we call it, the Shanghai Five-Nation Mechanism, which was built in 1996. So there are totally 22 years. During these 2 decades, roughly we say, this organization has changed a lot in this area, in 3 areas. For example, we say the politics that promote the mutual trust among all nations in within this framework, and the number of the member states started from 5 to 6, and now when India and Pakistan joining, we have 8 members in total. And secondly, in the field of security, they solve the border problems. And thirdly, we say they promote economic development for all of them.
Okay, Russell, the SCO is described as a Eurasian political, economic and security organization. The economic cooperation mandate is pretty evident. Many of these countries have a close economic relationship with China through the Belt and Road Initiative. But in this particular summit, where did we see the political and security cooperation?
Yeah, that's sort of what I'm wondering about. You know, the lion's share of security till this point with the SCO has been more or less handled by Russia in terms of Central Asia. So what we're going to be looking forward to in future is more of a kind of coordination between countries like Pakistan, India, China, and Russia, to say nothing of the Central Asian countries themselves, being able to handle more of their own security, and at the same time working together. For example, Tajiks and Uzbeks and Kazakhs. In terms of security in past years, we hadn't seen too much of that cooperation. So that's going to really be key for border security and also for the flow of goods, generating capital flows across borders, for more and more cooperation, especially among the Central Asian states.
Shuja, just to Russell's point on there being more cooperation between, let's say, India and Pakistan on security issues, do you see that happening?
Not right away. Clearly, the greater security in the long run for South Asia as a whole, and for that I include Afghanistan in the equation, that is still missing as a full member of the SCO, would be on the economic side.
Right.
Once India, Pakistan, Afghanistan can get rid of their barriers to trade and movement of people and goods, then you can have much more meaningful discussion on security issues as well.
Let's talk about the economic relationship, Shuja, between Pakistan and China. Pakistan, of course, is attending this SCO for the first time as a full member. There is already a close relationship between China and Pakistan economically through CPEC, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. How important is the SCO for Pakistan?
The SCO gives an overall framework for the eventual success of something like CPEC. But it would really become really successful for the region as a whole, because the region is not very interconnected. South Asia is one of the least interconnected economically in the world in terms of an economic region. And so the CPEC offers an opportunity for a major tributary from Afghanistan that would link Central Asia to CPEC, and then through Pakistan down to the Gulf and beyond. There are opportunities for India also, particularly linking with Central Asia for energy purposes. And the TAPI pipeline is another initiative which is obviously predates the One Belt, One Road initiative. But I see a convergence of what the Americans have been calling their New Silk Road initiative with what the Chinese have now put into effect as the One Belt, One Road initiative.
Right. Sadanand, this was also India's first full year first time as a full member. Prime Minister Narendra Modi was the only leader who did not endorse China's Belt and Road Initiative. Shuja mentioned that this could prove beneficial, membership could prove beneficial to India in terms of connectivity with Central Asia for energy purposes. But otherwise, what does India get out of this?
I think it's a great question, and I would say that in many ways, SCO has taken a bit of a gamble. Right now, SCO with 6 members was obviously much more coherent and cohesive, and now it's brought India and Pakistan into the tent, and obviously the benefits are it's much larger with many more people, but there are 2 potential drawbacks, which I think we'll have to see how they play out. The first is that it has brought the India-Pakistan relationship, which as we all know is very fraught, into the tent. In other organizations, such as the SARC, which is the South Asian Regional Cooperation Organization, we found that India and Pakistan, because of their bad relationship, have ended up paralyzing the organization. So that's one challenge that I think that SCO is going to have to overcome. And the second comes back directly to your point about BRI. Mm-hmm. As you know, India is the most prominent holdout in the world. Yeah. It was one of the few countries, one of the few large countries that did not attend the Beijing meeting on the Belt and Road Initiative. Now, I think that there is a way around Indian objections, which have to, currently the objections are centered on territorial sovereignty issues in territory that is claimed both by India and Pakistan. Perhaps there's a way around it. But for now, I think India is putting sovereignty issues ahead of whatever economic benefits it might be able to get from BRI. And that's something that we should be keeping a close eye on to see where this develops over the years.
Getting back, Sadanand, to your point about the security challenges inside the SCO, how does India work inside the SCO with Pakistan when it has been blaming Pakistan for some of the security problems that it's facing, terrorist attacks, for instance?
Which is one of the big questions, right? Yeah. Which comes back to my point about the organization becoming potentially a lot less cohesive. One of the big issues between India and Pakistan, of course, has been terrorism, right. Including justice, bringing the people who were responsible for the 2008 Mumbai attacks to justice, including the head of a terrorist group based in Pakistan, who India wants to put on a UN list. So these have been tricky issues involving not just India and Pakistan, but India, Pakistan, and China. Now, if the SCO is able to actually resolve some of these issues, I think it could do tremendous good for the region, right? Okay. If it can bring these 2 countries to focus more on their economies and less on that. But I'm just saying that if you're looking at the historical record, we have to go into that being a little bit skeptical.
Okay, Wang Peng, listening to what you just heard there about security issues, we've kind of framed this as challenges for the SCO, but could it also be opportunities for the SCO?
Yes, challenges and opportunities are always at the same time. For example, we say there are 3 foes in front of all SCO countries, that we say, namely separatism, extremism, and terrorism. In nearly all countries, 8 countries suffer the 3 problems. So they are the common problems and challenges to us. But there are also the opportunity for the cooperation. For example, we say the China, Russia, India, Pakistan. We may, within the framework of SCO, and we propose more frequently the military exercise and also the aid to each other. Right. And we may put the military exercise as the regularly regime. So in this way, this practice in what we say the non-traditional security field may promote the political mutual trust, in a higher level of politics among those states. So that's a great opportunity for all of us.
Okay. Russell, go ahead.
Well, I'm sorry. I just wanted to say that I think one potential step in a very serious direction could be for the SCO to sort of create a mediative body of various member states that would, for example, work together with India and Pakistan on issues, such as Kashmir, such as why is Pakistan getting the lion's share of rail links or rail transportation if it's an economic issue and that's a problem. I mean, I think that might be really helpful, and by the same token, it would be enormously helpful for some of the grievances among the Central Asian countries of the former Soviet Union. So, they have the problem of the thick borders. Sorry.
So if I could just jump in on that, I think the issue is not about who gets the lion's share, who gets how much infrastructure. The issue in terms of why India has been such a prominent holdout is because some of this infrastructure passes through territory which India regards as its own. So it's a political issue. It's not an economic issue. It's not a question of simply dividing the spoils. That's the first question. Secondly, on Kashmir, for example, we know very well that India has a kind of neuralgia about any kind of external involvement. Now we could disagree with that or agree with that. That's a separate issue. But the fact is that until now, India has been extremely reluctant to treat this as anything but a bilateral issue between India and Pakistan. So if we think that something like this, which has sort of been going on for 70 years, is going to change dramatically, my point is not to say that none of this is possible. My point is simply to say that we should lower our expectations to realistic levels.
So at this stage, India will resist any efforts to make this a multilateral.
For sure.
Right. Okay, Wang Peng, you wanted to say something. Go ahead.
Well, in my view, both India and Pakistan may get benefits in security from the SCO framework. Let's look back at history. 20 years ago, China and Russia also suffered some conflicts of border issues, and the predecessor of SCO, just I have mentioned, the Five Nations mechanism, played this role of mediator. Let's provide a platform for China, Russia, as well as other four stands in Asia. They have used this platform to negotiate and cooperate with each other in a peaceful approach to solve their border conflicts and other problems as issues. So in this way, now, 20 years later, maybe India and Pakistan may also draw the insights from Russia, China, and do something within the framework, use it as a mediator, as a platform to solve their problems.
Okay.
It's benefit for both of them, as well as the Asia as a whole.
Shuja Nawaz, if we look more broadly at the SCO, are we seeing some kind of a pivotal moment here now in the conduct of international relations? I mean, if we look at what happened at the G7, where we had a lot of tension, a lot of dissonance, very different atmosphere at the SCO meetings, could we see the SCO playing a bigger role?
I think so. And to go back to a point that Sadanand made about the SARC grouping, a lot of the reason why that didn't work too well was India was an extremely large and important part of SARC. And so any differences between India and Pakistan ended up basically stalling any movement forward. The SCO comprises other countries also, some of them large economies, important political players on the global and regional scene. So it'll be a bit easier, I think, to draw India and Pakistan into this larger circle, and also potentially this larger economic circle, which offers opportunities, so that it's not just a question of losing something and not gaining anything in return, but the possibility of gaining a lot from being part of a well-integrated region. The other point I think was worth making is that all the countries, as our colleague in Beijing was saying, all the countries face terrorism and militancy issues. And it'll be very critical to see if this SCO can create a clearinghouse on these matters, to be able to share information, analyses, and to be able to deal across borders with militancy and terrorism, something that's been missing in the region for a long time.
Right, Russell, what is your view on that? You know, we're living in a changing world, shifting alliances. Most of what was put in place as far as international relations are concerned was put in place after the Second World War by the United States and its allies. That is now changing. Do you expect to see a group like the SCO wanting to have a bigger say in how these rules are made and how they're implemented?
Well, when you say the rules that are being made, I mean, are you talking about sort of interdiction of narcotics? Are you talking about policies toward extremism as opposed to terrorism?
Well, I'm looking very broadly at organizations, you know, the Bretton Woods organizations, the United Nations itself. Is that changing now? Would an organization like the SCO have more say, would want to have more say?
I think the SCO certainly has the potential right now to have a lot more say, in particular because they're becoming much more powerful economically. Until this point, China has not asserted itself so politically in Central Asia in particular and in other regions, and it's ceded a lot of the politics and the security of Central Asia to Russia. And I'm curious to see if that's going to change at all right now. I also think that to this point, you know, since 2001, there certainly has been terrorist activity, extremist activity throughout Central Asia. But at the same time, we've never seen any serious challenge for power in any of the Central Asian countries coming from Islamic militancy or terrorism. And I think one always wants to be a little bit careful, you know, sort of deciding between religious activism and religious activists as opposed to people who are bona fide extremists and certainly terrorists. So there's a lot to consider.
Right, Wang Peng, let's look at the Chinese role here. This is what the Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi had to say. Let's watch.
President Xi Jinping pointed out that we should adhere to a concept of global governance, of dialogue, construction and sharing, and encourage all countries to work together to build a community with a shared human destiny. The Qingdao Declaration also stresses that the SCO will promote a more just and balanced international order on the basis of equality, sharing, comprehensiveness, cooperation and sustainable security. This is the political consensus reached by member states on the basis of common needs, which will contribute to the improvement of global governance.
So, Wang Peng, how important is Chinese leadership to the SCO?
Yes. China's leadership may play a role as the dual engine to support SCO as well with Russia. These two giants cooperate with each other, provide a lot of public goods for the SCO, and lead other states to promote the level of cooperation in three fields, namely the politics, security, and economy. For example, we say in the field of politics, the mutual trust level, not only between China and Russia, as well as between other states within the framework, reached higher and higher levels during the past 2 decades. And what is more important, that in security, we say the positive and passive security, these two fields, they also achieve a lot of achievements. For example, that right now, roughly say, we say there's no longer the border conflicts between those states. The 6 members among the SCO. So now we are looking at India and Pakistan to see whether they can learn some lessons, draw some insights from these other 6 brothers to solve their own problems. And in the field of economy, we know there are 5 stands. They are staying in inner Asia, and so they need more approaches to connect with the outside world. And this field, China, Russia, we propose 2 what we say, the ambitious programs to connect each other, as well as the broad picture with the whole world. For example, we say the BRI, Belt and Road Initiative, and Russia's Eurasian program. So this provides opportunities.
Go ahead, Russell.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that that's all quite correct. What my colleague in Beijing said. When you listen to President Xi, you know, what you're hearing is, I don't want a rivalry. I don't want to go back to the Cold War. I'm not looking for a bloc that's opposed to your bloc. Right. But the real question is, what, you know, we wonder, on our side of the world, we wonder what's Russia's role going to be. And is Russia just sort of going along with this for the time being? Because, you know, historically, it hasn't been so easy with Russia vis-a-vis Europe, Russia vis-a-vis the United States. It does seem in some ways that the United States and China have had more cooperation.
Okay. Yeah, Sadanand, there's another power dynamic, and that is the growing relationship between the United States, the growing security relationship between the United States and India. We saw that most recently at the Shangri-La dialogue. So does India straddle both sides of this?
That's a terrific question, Anand, and I think that's precisely what's going on. I mean, you have this elaborate chess game that is being played across Asia, across the Indo-Pacific, to use the term that's in vogue these days. And what you see is that India is at the same time attempting to deepen its relationship with China and Russia, not just through the SCO, but Prime Minister Modi has also recently had summits, both with President Xi and with President Putin. And on the other hand, you have the revival of the so-called Quad, which is the US, Japan, Australia, and India, in a kind of, informal grouping of the four large major democracies of the region. Now, India is kind of unique in kind of having a foot in each of these. And at some point, you've got to sort of, this is a sort of, India, as you know, has this old tradition of non-alignment and sort of thinking a lot of its own strategic autonomy and so on. But it'll be very interesting to see how sustainable this is over time. Can you really deepen your relations with SCO and at the same time deepen your relations, your military relations with the US in the current environment? And I think it'll be a big challenge for India's diplomats.
What is your view on that, Shuja?
I think in the short run, I would be prepared for some turbulence. The reason for that being that the Russian and Chinese leadership is fairly consistent and well established. As our colleague at Northeastern University mentioned, the stands have also been stable politically. People who are in power are going to remain in power. But South Asia, which is now the new entrant into this organization, the SCO, is going to be under the throes of election fever. So whether you're looking at Afghanistan, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and possibly India this year if the elections are brought forward, if not certainly next year, it's going to be very tough for the leadership in these countries to be able to take any bold initiatives and to follow up. So we should really be looking slightly over the horizon to see if they can really play a proper role as they should in the SCO.
Russell, very quickly, I've only got about 30 seconds left. The SCO has often been compared to NATO, and I'm wondering whether that is an appropriate comparison, because we know that one of the most, or perhaps the most important doctrines of NATO is that an attack on one is an attack on all. I mean, could we ever see that with the SCO?
Right now, I would be hard-pressed to say that it's in NATO's image in that sense. Yeah. I think there's too much fractiousness. But I'm not saying it's insuperable. I'm just saying right now I don't think it's in NATO-worthy position. So even between China and Russia.
Okay, and that's where we have to leave it. Thanks to all of you for being with us. That's all we have time for, but the conversation continues online. Chat with us about this or any other show on Twitter. We're at CGTN America, or visit us on Facebook. That's at facebook.com/CGTN America. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington, D.C. Thanks for being with us.